It's very important to read a variety of books in life. This past year, I read 41 books, and every year for about 3 years, I've upped my reading goal by 6 books. So, 2025, my reading goal is now going to be 47 books at the minimum. Most of those for 2024 were nonfiction, anywhere from programming, RabbitMQ, React, web scalability for startup engineer, even down to Shaolin's Grandmaster Text, Plato, the Five Dialogues, Single Handed Sailing, and many others. And I try to read across a broad range of topics that I'm kind of interested in, but oftentimes I find books based on references from other books. So if you ever look up the bibliography in the back of the book, you may find a book that stands out to you based on what sources were referenced in something. And I'm currently reading The Ulysses Factor, and that book was referenced in Single Handed Sailing by Henderson. And that book is about people who have sailed around the world or made short voyages single handed or alone. And it's very interesting because you can get into their head and you can really learn like what they were feeling and experiencing in the time. And on a similar note, I read a lot of software engineering books, not really because they're very, entertaining to read. On paper they're very dry, but I get a lot of entertainment just in seeing, one, how many I can read, but how well I can remember the information and how well it helps me perform at my job. And I always have a goal, whenever I'm reading software development books specifically, is I need to get some value out of it. So if the value is I'm able to negotiate a higher salary, then that's what the value is. But if the value is that I'm able to make something better, more quality, because I put in the time and effort to read a book, then that's the value there. So it's important to derive some value out of whatever book you're reading, because I think that once you identify what the value is, then I think that you're going to be more excited to read it, and you're going to have a lot more incentive to go and look for more similar books. And I remember one time I read a book about how to run theaters, and not because I have any interest or any desire to run a theater, but it was just interesting to learn about something completely different than what I do. And I learned about business models for theaters, how theaters attract shows and how they market and how they have to plan well in advance, how they have to sell tickets, how the ticket prices are influenced by the show and the times of the show and how they have to maintain the theater. There were so many things that I thought about, and I never even considered all the amount of work that goes into running a theater. And it was just a book that I got on the shelf from the library, and it's just things like that I like to read because it gets me thinking about something that I would not have really thought about. And I don't know if I'll ever use directly the information that I learned in that book, but I think it just the simple act of thinking about something that you didn't think about before, I think is helpful in life. I think it helps me to broaden my horizons and to broaden my perspective on a number of things. And I really feel that, while I'm not reading about software development explicitly in the book like that, I think that the general principle of thinking about something in a different way translates into software development. Because, when I think about the effort and time it goes into maintaining theater, even down to just making sure the seats aren't falling apart or not squeaking, uh, there's just so many details that I never even thought of. And the same thing is true in software development, right? There's so many details that get overlooked and so many details that you don't even really realize go into it, right? If you work in .NET, you can work for a while and not even look at any of the included middleware. You just kind of take it for granted, right? When you go to a theater and you sit down, you take for granted the amount of work that made it possible to have that seat in working condition and order. And I feel like the general principle of that applies to a number of things in life. And the one thing that I didn't think about, and the one thing that I feel like reading a lot, but reading on a number of topics has forced me to do is really slow down and really consider what it is I'm doing in life, to be honest with you. Because it's very easy today to be moving at a very, very fast pace and to really miss your surroundings, to really miss what it is you're doing. Because today society really values speed, moving with haste, and just being heads down and working at 110% effort 24/7. But a lot of times we just need to slow down. A lot of times we just need to be patient. And for me, slowing down and reading on a variety of topics has forced me to not only be more patient, but it's forced me to consider a lot of things that I would not have considered, to be more empathetic and to be more really just understanding. Because I feel like it's easy to judge somebody, but it's harder to judge somebody once you've read about their perspective because you begin to understand them. And once you walked around a little bit in their shoes, you understand more where they're coming from. And reading on a variety of topics has helped me to be, I feel like, more of an understanding person. And so, my goal for 2025 is really the same goal. And that goal is to just broaden my perspective, to learn about things that I wouldn't normally learn about. And I'm doing more reading than I did in college. And I really feel that, the library is one of the best resources that we have, is paying taxpayers in the U.S. because we're paying for the library with our tax dollars. And so we have this free knowledge that's just sitting in a room, just waiting to be checked out. And the library is also an excellent resource because you can rent movies for free, video games for free. Some libraries offer streaming services for free. You can rent tools. Some libraries have workshops, equipment, art supplies. So many things that are offered completely for free as part of your tax dollars. So I've really seen people actually cut out entire streaming subscriptions because they get them through their library. You can often get free subscriptions to audiobook services like Audible, I think I've seen. Um, there's a lot of services that really go unmarketed but are available through your public library. And so I really will look into it. But I think one activity that I found to be helpful and beneficial is honestly just walking around the library with no really goal in mind. No real book that I'm actively looking for. Because it's funny how sometimes you kind of stumble across a book, and while you weren't explicitly looking for it, when you see it, you know that that's the one that you want to read. It's kind of weird how that works, and I've had that happen a few times. Whether that's the title that kind of catches you, or the cover of the book. It's interesting when it does happen. While it doesn't happen all the time, the moments that it does happen is fun. And I think that it happens on books that you wouldn't normally think it would happen. For me, it was a book about running theaters, and another time it was a book about Iceland. And there's just so many instances of that happening. And on the surface, it may just seem like that. You'll have just random facts and knowledge just kind of floating around your head, just taking up space. But I don't see it that way. I really see it. Everything that you read is just building up your perspective and your overall knowledge base of the world and the universe. And on that same vein, yeah, you can check out like some encyclopedia or something like that just to cover, just to read a general knowledge base of humanity. But it might not be the most interesting. So I think reading is vital. And I know I've talked about on the channel the importance of reading in software engineering, and I really believe it's true because so many problems that still exist in software engineering have been written about it very in depth decades and decades ago, and they're still being worked on in some form or fashion. And the open problems that still exists are main reasons why we're seeing a lot of this technology come about in the first place today. And so I find that reading older papers around the 80s, around like for example, distributed systems is interesting because we're largely still having the same problems, right? We're still having the same battle of trade-offs today. And I think we're always looking for a quick answer or solution to the trade-offs. Um, but it's just not going to happen. And I feel like reading historical documents or older papers or books written about the topic will help guide a level of understanding. And there's one series that what is the I'm trying to think of the series now. I believe it was McGraw Hill. I think there's a computer science series that was published in the early '80s that you can get those books for a few dollars each. I have distributed systems and an introduction to um, systems with data structures with applications. Now they use kind of archaic languages, but the overall principles discussed in those books, I think, carry over into really any topic in software engineering that you want to go into. And it's fascinating because it's easy to see a lot of problems today as being new, but when you start reading older texts and material, you realize that it's really just the same problems, just showing up in a new way. And I really feel that that helps to bring some kind of peace because you know that the problems that you're running into, people ran into 50 years ago, and you're just part of the general collective that are trying to figure out how to tackle these problems and how to solve them. And I really feel that that brings a level of grounding that you wouldn't be able to get apart from reading. Um, when you watch a video or a quick tutorial, it's easy to follow along and grasp like conceptually what's happening or follow along with the code. But a lot of the theory and a lot of the underlying decision making goes unnoticed. And that theory I feel like is brings a level of understanding that helps guide your decision making further. But I find that theory comes best through reading. Um, and for me, reading has produced the most amount of learning about a lot of software development. I often have a hard time sometimes following along with tutorials, especially if the topic is complicated or is very technical. But something about if I read it in a book, it just sticks with me better. And I'm able to understand it deeper, but I'm also able to think about it. And something about a physical book helps me think about it more. I don't know if it's just because I work on a screen, so I'm tired of looking at screens. That might be part of it, but I really feel like something about having a physical copy of a book in hand and being able to take notes on the pages really allows for a deeper level of understanding. Um, at least I think it does, right? I think that that's what's happening. I hope. So, all that to say is reading is so important. And so, 2025, I I really want to continue the trend of reading, um, and I'm trying to figure out what books I want to read in 2025. I don't quite know what software development books I'm going to read this coming year. I'm trying to make a list together and figure that out. Oftentimes I don't really know until like a month before, but I'll try to figure that out and I'll try to make either a list or some kind of content on it. Either way, I'll produce something about it. So yeah, going into 2025, I'm definitely going to continue making content about books and talking about what I'm learning in software development from these books. So anyway, that's all I got. So I'll see you in the next one.